Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first session of our brand new CPD programme for primary teachers called CreatED. It's a subject specialist training series, and there will be 3 different mini-series focusing firstly on music, then we'll move on to dance, and then we will do art and design later on in the year. So thank you so much for coming along today. I'm Charlotte Dack, and I'm one of the area managers here at Culture Bridge North East. And for those of you who don't know much about us, just a little bit to say, Culture Bridge North East is Arts Council England's bridge organisation for the North East. And our mission is to connect the cultural and education sectors together so that children and young people have access to a great cultural education. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce and hand over to our facilitators this morning. We've got Jeanne, Hale and Claire King, and Jeanne and Claire are independent consultants, and they've been leading most recently on our Creative Classrooms programmes, our Cultural Leadership in Education programme, and our Secret World of Schools programme too. They both have a vast background in senior leadership in schools and are school governors in various schools across the region too. We're also joined by Rob Anderson today. Rob is a freelance dancer and is here to observe the session today because we're lucky to have him delivering our next CreatED mini-series in May, which is going to focus on teaching dance in primary schools. So welcome, Rob. And I'm going to hand over to Jeanne and Claire now, so I hope everybody has a great session.
Thanks, Charlotte. Brilliant. Good morning, everyone. So we've already had introductions. That's great. Maybe Jeanne could just give a little wave.
Hi.
Jeanne. Hi, Jeanne. Brilliant. Okay, so welcome everyone and welcome to our first session on music. Jeanne and I are really excited to do this. We're wanting to do a specialist session for music for quite a long time. So we're really thrilled that Culture Bridge are letting us do this. So if you could move on slide for me, Charlotte, that'd be brilliant. So Charlotte mentioned that we've got 3 sessions especially for music specialists in this series. The session 2 and session 3 are both going to be with Rob Kitchen, who many of you may already know. Rob works at Sage Gateshead. He's a brilliant musician and fantastically experienced in working with schools. So session 2, he's going to be running kind of a conversation piece with a teacher, Sinead, who's at Ravenswood Primary. And that session is going to give you really good insight into some leadership tools and strategies, all kinds of insights into how they've been coping and developing music. And although it's a case study on one school, there's lots of transferable ideas and tools in that session that I think you'll really enjoy. So we hope you join us for that one. Session 3, we're really excited about that one because it's going to be completely practical, lots of activities, top tips, ideas. Rob's going to share things with you that you can use for remote teaching, but he's also going to be sharing things for normal classroom as well. So that's going to be a really practical session. And as I say, they're all dedicated to music. So we're really excited about that. Okay, brilliant. Let's start to talk about today then, what we're going to do today. Thanks, Charlotte. So I won't read that. I'll let you have a look at that for yourself just for a minute to see what we're going to do today. Okay, so hopefully you can see we're trying to get a balance here between giving you opportunities to meet each other, to talk to each other, to share and to connect together, but also to have some really good input from us. Okay, so we'd like to do a little bit of a warm-up here using the idea of metaphor. So what we'd like you to do is to think about how are you feeling about the way the music curriculum is currently being delivered in your school right now. You might want to think about COVID times, remote times, but also think about when we're not in COVID as well. So in general, how are you feeling about the way that your music curriculum is operating in your school right now? And to express your feelings, we'd like you to choose a couple of pictures and use the pictures as a metaphor to express that feeling, and stick the number of the picture and your explanation, like a sentence or 2, into chat. So for example, I might put in chat 18, which is the scales, and I might write something like, I'm a bit concerned at the moment because there's an imbalance in our curriculum. I feel we're spending too much time on, say, core subjects, and I feel that music's being a bit marginalized, for example. Or I might pick something more positive, maybe number 22, the sunflower, and I might say, I'm really pleased about some of the work we've been doing remotely. for our children. We've had some fantastic projects, e.g., so that might be something I'm feeling really positive about. So choose a couple of pictures. It could be something, a concern or a worry, something that you're happy or excited about, and just start to put into chat there how you're feeling about your music curriculum. Okay, we're going to give you maybe 3 minutes, something like that. And as they come into chat, you can also have a look at what everybody else is saying, which is quite fun, and put your ideas in there too. Okay, off you go. Feel free to comment, Jean, if something tickles you there.
Yeah, I think it was the beware of the dog. It's being wary of music, and particularly now, what is apparent is that everybody is facing the challenge, and COVID is presenting us with a challenge, and we are going to touch on that. But yeah, beware of the dog. Yeah.
Okay, we might be drying up a little bit there. Thank you for that. As Jean said, we'll be talking a lot more about these issues and the things that you've pulled up, but that's a really nice start, so thank you. Okay, Jean, do you want to move us on?
Okay, so we're just going to have a little think again about your own context. And we know that, music embodies one of the highest forms of creativity, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit more when we talk about why is music important. But it does give children a lot of skills. It helps them develop a lot of skills. What we wanted you to just kind of identify is, in your context, how much is music valued within your curriculum? Does it have high status in the curriculum, or, as one of the comments has just kind of highlighted, currently it's kind of flown away because other priorities and other challenges have come in? And set against that, is it really embodied in what you do? So if you value music and it's well embedded in your curriculum, then you might think about where to put your mark on this grid. So if we were to say, for this, I can't, because I'm not screen sharing, but if we look at the one at the bottom, so it's highly valued, in a sense, a school where music is highly valued, but is it really embodied in things that they're doing? And vice versa. So what I wanted you to think about is, where would you put your mark? And I'd like you to put your stamp on the grid. Thanks, Chris. Karen. Christina. Oh, we've got a star. Any others?
Sorry, I'd put mine I would say we're bigger on value than embodied in what we do. So sort of nearish to the middle on value, but sort of lower down perhaps in embodiment.
Okay. Interesting. An interesting picture in terms of the value that we're placing on music. But perhaps we don't feel overall from this picture that it's embodied in what we do. Would anybody like to make a comment on that aspect in terms of where they put theirs? Christine, yours was one of the first to appear. Would you like to just make a little comment?
Do you want me to speak? Gosh, might be easier. In our school, we employ somebody to do our PPA cover, and that is predominantly where our music teaching is. And I think it's the demands of the curriculum that it isn't as embodied as it perhaps was earlier on in my career, which is very long. I've been teaching a very long time. So earlier on in my career, we made more provision for that in a sort of cross-curricular way. Yeah, I feel that the curriculum has become more segmented.
I think the fact that there are worries or challenges around how embodied provision is quite an interesting kind of focus for us in terms of discussion, and what your role potentially is in kind of improving that picture in a sense. Okay, I'm going to hand back to Claire
Okay, so what we're going to move on to now is to think about, Jeanne and I thought it'd be useful because it's, when we're kind of working in schools, we get kind of very locked into our own school and locked in our own context. And it's useful sometimes to look about what's happening at the national picture. So we thought we'd give you some insight into current provision of music, what it's looking like nationally, and what the impact of COVID has been nationally. So we're going to just share some insights to help fuel the discussion a little bit. Okay. So what we're going to do now is just talk about some of the headline challenges that you'll be aware of, but it's linking exactly to what Chris said, that, you know, Jeanne and I have been a teacher for a long time too, and certainly say 17 years ago, 10 years ago even, music had a much bigger status and time within the curriculum, and there is definitely, Chris is right, there has been a national decline for everybody in music. Now, that can't be just to do with individual schools, can it? It's got to be to do with a combination of factors: policy, curriculum change, Ofsted. Everything is kind of conspired to create a general decline. So we thought we'd just share some of the main headlines that are particularly prevalent to primary sector. The first, and these all come from detailed research papers, which we can link you to if you want to read them. So the first thing is the status of music. We know that there is a massive gap, if you like, in provision. So there are some schools that still have music at the heart of the curriculum. They have enrichment, they have strong core curriculum for music. It's enhancing and enriching the lives of children in that setting significantly. And then we have everything from that to the other extreme, where music is virtually non-existent. And we know in particular for the remote learning offer, there are many schools who are not offering any music at all for children who are learning remotely. So there's a big gap, which probably isn't a surprise to you. If we move on to the second one, Charlotte. So the second key headline is around SATs. And we know, of course, that the provision around SATs had a massive impact on the way that schools manage their curriculum. We know that, and it makes sense, doesn't it? If you're going to be judged externally, schools are very concerned about making sure that they're appearing and that they are actually delivering to those standards that they're accountable for. And that has meant that there's been a really strong focus on core subjects because of that. It's an obvious correlation. Interestingly, that was put in black and white, the All Parliamentary Group for Music. It's nice to know there's a parliamentary group there, isn't it? But that parliamentary group in February 19 said, look at that statistic there, 50% of schools are not meeting the requirement for year 6. And that's a very worrying statistic. And of course, it has implications for children's music learning later on in their school career too. But SATs, we know that's a big problem. If we move on, the third area that's a big headline is actually singing. And I think Chris mentioned that in the chat. A lovely phrase she used about we feel muted, which is a really nice way to put it. But we know that singing in particular has really suffered. And some of you might be old enough, looking at you, maybe not all, but some might be old enough to remember the Sing Up project, which was a fantastic project that many schools were involved in. You know, I was part of that. It was absolutely marvelous. But of course, when the funding goes, when the government priority goes, it's very difficult for schools to sustain that level of engagement. So singing in particular is a cause for concern. And the last main headline is around curriculum design. In the last 5 years, schools have worked really hard to change and develop their curriculums, but we're still in that situation where, because of SATs in particular, you often see patterns in primary schools where maths, English and science are prioritised in the morning, and the afternoon is left for every other subject. And that means that we're sharing a very small amount of time between many subjects, music suffering in particular, but other creative arts too. And schools have this, what we call a carousel or a rotation system that you might be familiar with, where, you know, my child in year 5 might only do music every 2 or 3 weeks. So there's some massive issues there. So if we move on, that's kind of some of the headlines. This is before COVID even happened. Music was kind of suffering quite a lot. Then COVID happened, and you may be aware that there's strong research out now to say of all the subjects that teachers teach online remotely, music is officially now the most difficult subject to teach remotely, which is obvious why. But then The government guidance around COVID hasn't helped, has it? You'll be aware that DfE sent in messages like the day before schools opening, and how music leads were then supposed to organise, you know, external people, organise instruments and all of that kind of thing. It was almost impossible. So COVID situation had made things very, very difficult. I've put a kind of polite way of saying that at the bottom, some inconsistency and very little notice. I think that would be a fair way to describe the DfE's response to music. But the sad thing is, of course, that COVID has delayed the national plan, and that national plan for music is eagerly anticipated. You know, people who care about music are really excited about that, because a national plan always regenerates, it re-energizes, it puts music back at the forefront of policy. That was delayed because of COVID, but watch out for it, because it's ready, it's coming. You know, it's a bit like the next Marvel movie, it's all there, they just haven't released it yet. So that's been a problem because of COVID too. So let's move on, Charlotte, and move away from kind of general headlines to look at some more specific documents. Jeanne and I wanted to highlight some important documents to you that are making the case for music at the moment. So we've got the Incorporated Society of Musicians, the bottom left one there. It's a beautiful document, it looks pretty too, called that The Heart of School is Missing. And this is a really strong advocacy document talking about the problems that are being experienced for music at the moment, but it also talks about what we can do about it. It talks about being strong and challenging the status quo, and that we can turn this around, and there are lots of ideas in there to, you know, for the future to be brighter for music. But that's a really useful document. And that came out in December 20, and a few other things came out around the same time, which have really strengthened the argument to put pressure on government and leading organisations, you know, like Arts Council and so on, to really look at music again. The top left one, you may be aware that the Durham Commission in October 2019 did a big review of creativity, which was an influential document. The team at Durham Commission, they have saw it upon themselves to do an update on that document, looking at the impact of COVID, and there are strong references for music in there. It's a really useful document. Ofsted also, they did about 300 inspections towards the end of last year, and when they see a pattern, they produce a report called the State of the Nation, and they did a State of the Nation on music, and that document's very interesting too. So Jeanne and I thought, as a useful way of giving you access to that information, of course you can go in and look at them all if you'd like to, but we produced that handout that we sent to you. If you go into chat right at the top, I've put a link there to that handout in OneDrive. If you don't have it, you've also received the link from Culture Bridge as well. But that document we're going to use now, that document is really a summary of all the major points that are made in those 3 documents that I've described. So it's a really useful summary. And what we'd like you to do now is to have a look at that summary document. If you could move on, Charlotte, for me, that'd be brilliant. And the task is, I just want you on your own quietly, just for 2 or 3 minutes, to have a look at that document and see how many of those features are relevant to your context. You know, so we're not really doing singing at all. You might tick that, yeah, that's us. You might tick some of the other ones too. So just have a look at the research. How many apply to you? Just tick them. Which ones are causing you most concern? But also think about what are the sources for optimism, because we're talking about national trends here, and you might book the trend. You know, in your school, you might have strong priorities and values around music, and you are, despite the challenges, doing some really good things or trying to change things at the moment. So also think about what your sources of optimism are. So Jeanne and I are going to stop talking for a few minutes and just let you look at that handout and just reflect on those questions, and then we'll go into breakout rooms and let you have a chat with each other about what you think. Okay, off you go. Okay, so we're just under 3 minutes there. Don't worry if you haven't managed to look at all of them, because you're going to have another chat in a minute anyway in the breakout room. So Charlotte, if you could move us on to next slide, and then if we could go into some breakout rooms, please. Maybe groups of 3 would be ideal if we can do that. So in the breakout room, the challenge is just to have a chat about exactly what you've just been doing. How many of those features apply to you? Which ones are you most concerned about? And are there any sources for optimism? And just have a chat with each other. And we can give you 6 minutes for that, Charlotte, if that's all right. So groups of 3 would be ideal. Okay, welcome back, everyone. So Jeanne and I ended up all in the same room. So I'll just give you a little flavour of what we were chatting about. So I was with Christina and Catherine. Catherine works in a middle school and she's actually a music specialist. But she was saying that her normal routine of being able to access all of the children and have regular proper lessons with them has been completely turned on its head by COVID. And she's found herself in rooms without any equipment. She's found herself having the whole year group and then sometimes different classes and children, there's no continuity there. And it's just all been extremely difficult. But we also talked about, Christina made a really good point that one good thing about COVID is it's given senior leaders a chance to reflect and a bit of time to plan and think moving forward. And she feels a bit more optimistic that they're looking more towards that balance of the creative arts subjects and looking at how they can get that balance back, which is a bit more positive. So could someone from the other group just briefly give us a summary of what you were chatting about, a flavour of what went on in the other group?
Yeah, so there was 4 of us in our group, and there was a lot of overarching themes, really. Most of us had ticked most of the boxes, it turned out. And one of the saddest things we thought was the singing and not being able to do things as normal, and the enjoyment that usually brings, and not getting that was incredibly sad. We talked about how some of the older children were accessing things like Charanga or GarageBand to enable that and be able to do it safely from home. And we also talked about the challenges of things like being able to share instruments was not appropriate, but having that amount of things as well was very different. A couple of us are in early years, and sort of the difference between the amount of children that are allowed in nursery, for example, and the rest of the school is quite different in itself too.
Yeah, absolutely right. And early years presents a whole load of other challenges in terms of communication and messages and continuity of learning. Absolutely. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, some schools have been, although they have music specialists, they've been using internet resources, things that have been produced, especially for COVID. If I say another body percussion lesson, my little boy's just been, it's quite fun actually, he loves it. But, people have been innovative, haven't they? And said, we haven't got access to instruments and things, so let's just really get into body percussion and things like that. Yeah, I mean, it's a worrying picture, but hopefully it's a temporary picture. And I think the advocacy from the national forums and the new music plan coming out, things should start to move. And I think Christina's also right that SLT, it's on the radar. They know about this breadth and depth of curriculum. Kevin Collins has become the new commissioner for COVID catch-up. I'm really pleased about that, because from what I know of Kevin Collins, he is a broad and rich curriculum person. He does know the importance of creative arts subjects and things, so I'm optimistic that he's not going to come up with something too crazy like do English and maths all day or anything like that. Okay, so I think we should move on. Thank you for your contributions there. Jeanne's now going to give us a really nice injection of happy stuff around what's around music, because we need that. We need cheering up, Jeanne, so go for it.
Okay, so just a little bit of time for you to sort of sit and think about why music is important. So music essentially is something that stimulates the auditory nerves, i.e. our sense of hearing, but actually beyond that, there's an awful lot goes on in our brain. We actually have, researchers have found an amazing sound system effectively in our brain, and that music, whether it's listening to music or taking part in music, playing an instrument or singing, gives our brain a really, really big workout, because different parts of the brain respond differently to elements of music. So one part of our brain will respond to the rhythm or the beat of music. Another part will respond to pitch and tone. And another thing that music does with our brain is kind of help our memory. And there's a lot of research around dementia and the use of music with dementia patients. And our memory is very strongly linked to music. How many times do you listen to a song and you suddenly go, oh yes, I know that, and you can sing along and you know all the words, but it's years since you heard it. I think about that in terms of hymns. You know, there's so many hymns you know all the words to. Why? How do you remember them? I don't go to church anymore and I don't sing in church, but I know all the hymns I sang at school. So there's something going on in our brain that kind of sits it all there. And the other really, really interesting discovery is how music touches our emotions. So we feel emotion when we listen and respond to music. And there are 3 key areas in our brain that actually respond to music. And the other very clever thing about the brain is that it continually creates expectations for itself while it's transmitting and processing everything, that actually it will anticipate what might come next in the piece of music. So music is really important. It's really important because it gives our brain a very, very big workout. So next slide, Charlotte. So if we think about what is going on in our brain, and there's a lot of research that you can look into in terms of that talks about that in a lot more detail, and probably in a lot more scientific way than I've just described it. But I quite like the idea of the sound system and the really big workout. It appeals to me. So why is it important? So if you think about what's happening in our brains when we listen or play, we hear it, we're listening, we're responding emotionally. It creates empathy, we're concentrating. It's important, it improves our mental health. It can be important and it can improve motivation and engagement. If we play music, if you are lucky enough to learn a musical instrument, to play a musical instrument, or you can play a musical instrument, we are acting physically. We're using our physical skills as well as our kind of intellectual skills and our emotional skills. And we interpret, if we perform, we're interpreting music. So there's an element of artistic expression there. It can really build self-confidence and resilience. If you think about learning to play an instrument and the challenge that brings, then it can develop resilience. And if you play instruments along with other people, then there's a huge element of teamwork that is developed there as well. So moving on. So we know that that music is really, really good for our brain. We know that it gives it an incredible workout when we engage with music, and a lot of research, and again, there's a lot out there that you can look at, but there's a lot of research there about what the impact and the links are on children's broader learning. So if you think about the different areas of the brain that are responding, then it helps train the brain for different forms of thinking. The left side of the brain that is related to language and reasoning can be better developed, or can be helped to be better developed through music and song. So the lack of singing at the moment is a real shame, particularly with lots of young children. So we've got sort of people in early years here, and singing and song is really so important with young children. Pattern recognition. Children develop their maths and pattern recognition skills with the help of music. So if you're reading some form of annotation, and it doesn't have to be formal dots in a sense, children can annotate music in many different ways. It helps with pattern recognition. Research has shown that musicians are better listeners. They're more discerning listeners. They can discern sounds and they have better auditory retention. And music is physical. People who play instruments improve their hand-eye and coordination, and singing and rhythm develops coordination as well. So music is important because it gives our brain a workout, but it's really important because it also helps children engage, and it kind of helps lock other bits of learning into their development. So again, this is a really interesting quote that children who study the arts can learn to think creatively. Engaging in the arts helps them solve problems, helps them think outside the box, and helps them think that there may be more than one right answer. So we know, for all of us who support creative learning, creative thinking, using the arts, music, dance, drama, we know that we want children in the future to be inventive. We know they're going to have skills where they're going to be resourceful. And we know that engaging in the arts and engaging in creativity supports all of that. Music empowers children through sound and through music, and it allows them to exercise their imagination. So it's a really, really, really important strand of the arts that we want to see embedded in the curriculum, and that we want to see all children engaging with, not just specialist learning instruments, but all children engaging with music. So that's just a little sort of snippet about why I think it's important, really. Okay, thanks, Charlotte. Next slide. I've highlighted this document, which we need to send you the link for, but it's a new piece from Music Mark. Music Mark is an organisation that is an advocate for music in schools. It advocates for and champions high quality music provision. It's a membership organisation, and I don't know whether any of you are a member of Music Mark, but you might want to have a look at the website. It links to education music hubs and organisations that provide music education and provision. This document is a really interesting one, and I've highlighted it because it's a very accessible one. And it goes through 10 key benefits of music in schools. So if you have a responsibility for music and you want to use an advocacy document with your staff or with your colleagues or with your department, this is a really useful one, and also a really useful one for SLT to have a look at as well. And it's very recent. So we'll make sure that you get the link for that. Okay, so moving on. What we wanted to explore with you next was what's actually happening. What are you doing in your school? What models, what approaches you use to deliver your music curriculum? And we've highlighted 6 key areas that we feel are common to most schools. So do you use any music external specialists? Do you have anybody working in your school and you are linked through your music education hub? Have you a key classroom teacher role in music provision? So do all of your classroom teachers deliver music? Or in Catherine's case, as a specialist in a middle school, is it someone like Catherine who delivers music across the school? What instrumental tuition is provided? Are there opportunities for children to learn instruments? And what does that look like in your school? And where does music sit in that broader sense of enrichment? So what about after school clubs? How often, pre-COVID, let's think pre-COVID, what were concerts like? What were assemblies like? How many opportunities were there for children to perform? All really very important elements of the music curriculum. And then what CPD and professional networks have you had the opportunity to link to and with? And if it's none, that's fine. But if you have had some useful CPD or you have linked with professional networks, that would be good to share too. So I'd like you just to have a little think about that. And we're going to do an activity all together, which Claire's going to lead us on. But I'll just give you a couple of minutes just to have a think about those key areas. And then Claire will just explain how we're going to share.
Yep, okay, if we can move on. So what we're going to do, guys, is we are going to go into a breakout room, but it's going to be a little bit different. Technology could go a bit wobbly here. But what we're going to try is use a little online tool called MindMiser. And MindMiser is like a way of doing mind maps together online. So it's pretty cool. You can use it with the kids as well. If you could move us on, Charlotte. So what we're going to do is we're going to put you into breakout rooms and you're going to discuss exactly what Jeanne has said. So have a think about, have you got any good things to share about how you do external specialists, about any CPD that's happened, all of the things that Jeanne mentioned. But instead of just chatting about it, we would like one person in your breakout room to share the screen and to actually try and fill in this pre-populated mind map. All right, off we go, Charlotte. Let's do this.
And well done.
Technology worked. Yay. It's just fun to do something a bit different, isn't it? And I've all shown you about MindMiser now, and you might want to use it if you haven't discovered it before, because it is quite fun, isn't
It's
it?
a useful sharing tool. Just a couple of minutes just to pick up on a couple of points that have come up. Good to see working with the Music Hub. Music Partnership North is Newcastle, Northumberland. So good to see that schools are engaging with them for individual lessons. So that would be peripatetic music provision, presumably, specialists coming in to teach small groups. Just the CPD and professional networks are interesting. Rocksteady music, could somebody tell me a little bit about that or share a little bit about that? Whose was that one on?
I put that on. So Rocksteady Music it's a company that do individual lessons and things. They do a free assembly though, so they came in and did an assembly with the kids where they just got lots of different instruments out and showed how easy it is to play them, really, and like how quickly you can make a good sound.
Excellent.
So yeah, so that was quite good. The kids really enjoyed it. And then they do offer workshops and individual lessons. But we were kind of considering it, and then COVID happened, so we haven't never gone any further with that. But certainly what they did was really good. It's just that then it's the cost of the individual lessons.
Yeah,
we weren't sure that we would get much uptake.
Yeah, and that's another challenge, isn't it? That often if you want to work with external specialists, you know, even working with the Music Hub, there's a cost to it all, and it's how that balances out and what you actually choose to spend the money on, you know, whether it's whole school provision, whole class provision, or individual music tuition. Just another, somebody's highlighted the Sing Up website, another really, really useful resource for schools. Could you just slide it over a little bit, Claire, so we can have a look at the classroom teacher bit? Just looking at all classroom teachers delivering music lessons, this can be very daunting. How do you support those teachers? Presumably you're all here because you have some responsibility for leading music in a way. How do you support those teachers who just go, music's so hard?
Can I just speak again?
Yeah, do.
So personally, teachers in my school, a lot of people feel like they have to have real skills at music in order to be able to teach it. So some people kind of either go totally down I will follow what this plan says and I will do everything and don't deviate from it, and then lose a bit of the creativity side of it. Or they just say, I can't do it, and they just sort of panic. So I actually, I did the next unit of planning with one of our teachers who was going to be delivering it. And the first time we sat together and we did the whole plan together. And then the next time she did the plan and she asked me to go over it with her, you know, to check that it was right. And now she's independently doing that because we put some ideas in the first time about how to address these objectives, especially without singing. She's now gained confidence to do that herself.
Good. And there are resources that you can access and that you can use as a model across the school that teachers find quite accessible, I think. But I do think there is that common misconception amongst a lot of teachers that you have to know you have to be a specialist to deliver music, or you have to know a lot about music to be able to deliver it. And that goes across all arts areas as well. I think that people feel de-skilled. They feel they don't have the skills and the knowledge to deliver because they see music that in a particular way. But if you're able to work alongside members of staff and show them that, you know, there is a different approach and that they do have the knowledge, they do have the skills, I think that's really good.
Brilliant. Okay. Right, Charlotte, if we go back into presentation, I'm going to make an executive decision because I'm conscious of time. So what we were going to do next was to look at something called the Knowledge Exchange Forum, which Jeanne and I use quite a lot when we're doing face-to-face sessions. So if we can move on to the Knowledge Exchange, that'd be brilliant. Yeah, so it's called Knowledge Exchange, but we use it face-to-face, and we thought it'd be really nice for you to be able to offer ideas and share things to each other. So as a pre-course task, we asked if you could have a think about, is there something that you've heard of, just a bit like you've done there really, so something that you've heard about, something that you'd like to share, a resource or a piece of literature or a website or something that you've been using that's been really, really helping you. And what we were going to do, Charlotte, was to go into breakout rooms to do that. But I'm just conscious of time and I'd like to spend a bit more time on the Padlet. So could Charlotte, could you put an email address into the chat that people could send their knowledge exchange contributions to? And then if I could ask Charlotte to then collate those and send them out to you. So not that slide, Charlotte, if you just go back. So it's a bit like a Methodist supper. You know, if everybody sends Charlotte something, she will send 12 things back out. So I know that you were asked to prepare something as a pre-course task. So whatever it was just a website, an idea, or if it was a resource that you were willing to share, if I could ask you just after the session to follow the email that Charlotte's going to give you in chat and just send something in. And then what we'll do is make sure that any ideas that come in, we send them out to everybody. So you'll get a really nice email and it might have 5 or 6 little tips or links in there. And I think that would be a nice way to honor the exchange, but it'll give us a little bit of time. Is that all right with everyone?
Yeah,
Brilliant.
that's fine.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is move on to our last activity. So Charlotte, if you just let me, if you move on to the next slide. So what we'd like you to do for last words is we're going to use a little tool called Padlet, which is an electronic tool, a bit like MindMiser, and you're going to need your phone with a camera so that you can take a picture of a QR code that I'm going to show you in a moment. When the QR code comes up, you simply get your camera and you use your camera to capture that QR code, and it will take you to the Padlet website, which I'll explain in a moment. So when we get to the Padlet, we're going to ask you to leave some last words for today's session. So it could be, you might want to say something that you found useful today. It could be a key challenge that you're facing. It could be something that would be nice, which is my ice cream there, something that you think would be nice, some additional support that Culture Bridge may be able to help you with in the future. It's always good for us to know what you need and what would help you. So a bit of a wish list, tell us something that would be nice for you. And also, if you've got any questions that you want us to feed to Rob Kitchen, that's a lovely picture of Rob there. He hates that picture, but I think it's really cute. So that's Rob, and he'll be running session 2 and 3. And if there's anything that you would like to ask Rob at the Sage, you can put the questions into the Padlet. We will pass them on to him, and in the session, he will address your question or your issue. So it's a last words. You could do all 4, you could just do a couple, whatever you fancy, but leave something in the Padlet. So if we move on, I'll show you how to do that now. So remember, it's something you found useful, a challenge, something that'd be nice to have, or a question for Rob. When you go to the Padlet, it will look like this, and it's really simple. You just click on the blue cross, a little post-it comes up, and where it says write something, you just type it in. So type in a challenge, something that you'd like, a question for Rob, something that you found useful. Anything you'd like to say as a last word would be brilliant. Okay, so Charlotte, if we move to the next slide. So if you get your camera ready, the next slide that comes up will be the QR code. We'll leave that up there for a minute just to get everybody to click on it. and then we'll go live to the Padlet and you'll be able to see the contributions as they come up. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so there's your QR code. You simply put your camera over it and you should get a little link come up on your phone, and you click on the link and it'll take you to the Padlet. And if I miss anything, forgive me. What I'll do is when the session ends, I'll make sure that I copy everything and put it into the Padlet. I'll also leave the Padlet live. So if you want to go into the Padlet later, you can click on share and turn it into a PDF, and you can save it so you can get all of the ideas. And I think I'll do that for you and send it to Charlotte, and she can send it out with the knowledge exchange. All right? Brilliant. Yeah, I'll try and share that Padlet now and we can see what's up there.
Oh.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that feedback. That's really great. We do take feedback really seriously and we do respond. So that's lovely. Have a think if there's any, we've got a bit of time. So if you've got any questions you want to ask Rob at the Sage, anything that he can help you with, because he is a font of all knowledge, or give him a challenge or something that you want to know, you know, and we can pass it on. Maybe there's something, you know, that's a burning issue that we haven't discussed today that you would have liked to talk about. You could post something around that. Thanks to Karen for that Rocksteady link. People have appreciated that. Charlotte, is there anything else in particular that you'd be interested for people to post? Anything from Culture Bridge's point of view?
I don't think so. What we're going to be doing is sending out an evaluation form after session. So we'll have some of our kind of questions on there. So it would be great if everyone could it's just a link to kind of click and fill in a few questions. And really our website is the best place to find all the other bits and bobs that we're doing, our other sessions. We've got flyers on there about our upcoming courses and support programs and stuff. So please just Google Culture Bridge North East and have a look at us.
Wonderful. Okay. Should we move on to the last part of the session then? Thank you for that. I'll stop sharing. As I say, this Padlet idea, if you can still see my screen. So you see, if you click on share at the top, if you click on share, then you can save as a PDF. So you could save that Padlet if you wanted to. And Charlotte and I will do that and put it in the packs as well. Okay, brilliant. So if we could go back to PowerPoint, Charlotte, just to finish off. We're now finishing early. I'm sure you don't mind, but I didn't think we had time to do the full breakout. So it's better to be early than late, isn't it? Fantastic. So we hope you've enjoyed the session, and that we do hope that you'll join us for session 2. The idea is that there are links between the sessions, so it's great if you can do all 3, but if you can't, don't worry. We'd love to see you back for either session 2 or session 3 or both if you're able to come. Please remember also to that knowledge exchange, if you prepared a little something to share with other colleagues, please send that to Charlotte following that link, and we will send that back out to everybody with some of the links to the documents that Jeanne talked about as well. Yeah, that's it. We are finished a little bit early. Thank you so much for joining us and for making that technology work, because it's always a bit risky, but it did work, and that's fantastic. And we'll be here for 5 minutes. If anybody wants to stay on and ask us anything or have a chat, then we're quite happy to have a chat with you. But if not, thank you so much for joining us. It was lovely to see everyone, and good luck with music. I know it's tricky. And I hope some of you enjoyed meeting Rob as well. Rob's fantastic new temporary addition to our team, and he's going to be leading dance sessions. We're so looking forward to that with Rob. He's absolutely brilliant. So we hope you'll join us for dance sessions too, but we hope to see you for music this term. Great.
The next 2. Yes, thanks everyone. It's been a great session, some really good feedback, and it's given us a little bit of food for thought as well, which I think we'll have a chat with Rob about over the next couple of sessions, particularly the challenges, I think, going back post-COVID, and how you can maintain music provision given the challenges that you face. So thank you for sharing, everyone. It's been a lovely morning, lovely to meet you all. And don't forget to look at the Creative Classroom's website, because there's lots and lots of resources on there. And if you're not signed up to the email from Culture Bridge, do that as well, because that's really, really useful for links and contacts and opportunities. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.